on Monday, October 22nd. Let me call the Boothbay Harbor Selectmen's meeting to order. Introduce our board and our honored guests tonight. We have Mike Tomko from the Planning Board Chair in the audience, who I forgot last meeting, and former selectman reminded me, and so I don't want to forget that. We also have Julia Latter, our financial officer, in the audience. Kelly Bigos, our recording secretary. Tom Woodman, our town manager. Selectman J.D. Warren, Art Hathaway, Valerie Augustine, and Bob Spillane, and I'm Bill Hamblin, the chairman. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of our October 9th, 2012 meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? The motion carries. The next order of business is the financials, and I'll turn the floor over to Julia Latter.
Total revenue year-to-date, $2,750,000. Total expenses, $2,765,642. Accounts payable, $440,307.80. Does anyone have any questions about the revenue or expenses?
It looks like we're on target.
We are on target. We're about 2% over 7% compared to last year. We just made a couple of large capital expenditures.
In fact, we're remarkably similar to last year.
And we're still at 50% of our collection rate for taxes year to date.
Excellent.
And the bank balance is $3,029,309.
Any other questions for Julia?
Very good, Julia.
Julia, thank you. The next order of business is town meeting manager announcements. Tom, you have the floor.
Just a couple of reminders. Our next meeting falls on holiday, November 12th. So I remind everyone that we generally move that to the next day, which would be Tuesday the 13th. This Wednesday at 6 p.m. is the first meeting of the Comprehensive Planning Committee. And I think Mike Tomko is going to talk more about this in a little bit, but on the 30th is the walkability study from 3 to 7, and that starts here. There's a tour around town and then light meal near the end of that. So the only other thing is the public access officer, and were you going to bring that up, Phil? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay, so you talked about the comp plan meeting tomorrow.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I may address the town manager. Tom, could you send a note on the date of or a telephone call? Because I do not have the lady's telephone number, but Mrs. Janos Newell requested that she be advised of the first comprehensive plan meeting, and I promised her that I would twist your arm and
Sure.
get you to send her a note.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
So our next meeting is scheduled for the 12th, which is, I guess, when Veterans Day is celebrated.
Yep.
And so do I hear a motion to move our meeting to the 13th?
So move.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion?
I have a question. I was wondering if anybody would be opposed to moving it to the 14th, which is a Wednesday evening.
I don't have any problem with that, so that we don't conflict with the task force.
Probably
Would you like
fine.
to change your mind?
Thank you very much.
Respectfully,
Oh, is there
there's a planning board meeting that evening.
That would be a problem.
Yeah.
Not that I know of any applications.
is it at 7 o'clock?
6 o'clock, and we're very efficient.
So
Well-
it's going to be on the
We don't want
Wednesday.
to overlap.
We can do that. We could move it a week ahead, since it's an overlap week. It's going to be 3 weeks until the 12th. We could have it on the 5th, which would be 2 weeks from now.
I wouldn't do that. That's the night before the election. This room will be
Yeah,
all
this
set up
room
for
is
the
going to be all
election.
set up. All right, scratch that idea. What's the pleasure of the board? Scheduling is always so much fun.
The 14th would be all right if we can get Mike's meeting moved up pretty fast. We can meet on the 14th.
As far as I know, there are no applications that the board that I've been aware of in front of the board.
Okay, so it looks like maybe you'll have a short meeting?
And we have nothing that's held over from the last
Okay.
planning board meeting.
And your meeting is at 6?
Yes, that's correct.
All right.
Sounds like it would work.
Sounds like it would work, so why don't we go ahead with that until we hear differently. So do I hear an amendment to the motion?
I move that we amend to change the selectmen's meeting to Wednesday, the 14th
I'll-
at 7 PM.
I'll second that.
So we have an amended motion to move the meeting to the 14th at 7 PM. Any further discussion? All in favor? So moved.
Thank you very much.
That's it for,
That's all I have.
okay, that gets us to our public hearings, of which we have none. And so that will move us to our first public forum. We have a packed house tonight, or at least a very full house tonight. So let me just run through what I understand the ground rules to this. We have two public forums because it was desirous that the public have a chance to comment on the business that was in front of the selectmen tonight. And the only agenda item we have is the St. Andrews Task Force activity report. And since I suspect that's why the majority of you are here, that works together very well. So in this first public hearing, let me ask you to contain your comments to the St. Andrews Task Force and related topics. And if you have some other piece of business that you want to bring up, wait for the second public forum that occurs after the selectmen have done their business. I would ask that when you're called upon, you please stand and state your name, and that we limit ourselves to residents of Boothbay Harbor for the first part. If there are non-residents who wish to speak, if you could wait till everybody else is done, and then we can petition the board and we can go ahead with people who are non-residents. I think that's it. Having said that, do I hear any questions from the floor? Seeing, no. Palmer.
I speak as the appointed by the selectmen representative to the Boothbay Region Ambulance Service Budget Committee, which has held an unusually early meeting. As anybody who's dealt with this in the past knows, that the ambulance budget usually comes in well over the wire of December the 31st, and we get to it in about March. We had a meeting a few days ago. I won't go through much of it because we didn't go through the minutiae of the budget. The bottom line figures are probably interesting. Basically, the town's contribution in the current fiscal year, 2012, is $38,086. They will be asking for approximately $201,442 for the coming 12-month period, starting July the 1st. In addition, there will be a 3.5-month budget situation starting March the 15th, which is when they anticipate going on with whatever new plan there is, for which an additional $56,000 approximately will be requested from the town, which can be approved only in a town meeting. I checked with friends in a couple of other towns. South Bristol, for example, in the past 2 years, they have a population of 874 people. The request for each of the past 2 years from CLC, Central Lincoln County, has been $2,700. Noblesboro, with roughly twice the population, 1,500 people, and the request for the last 2 years, which they gave, was $1,650. Do you have any questions beyond that? Because I doubt if I can answer many. The fact being that, well, I say that, it was a mostly self-explanatory circumstance there from the man that runs the organization, Scott Blash, who's their operations executive. And it had to do a lot with training, and it had to do a lot with deployment of ambulances, why you need certain numbers at certain times in certain places and so on, and the overall anticipated impact. The $201,000 figure, admittedly, will be based on expectations and speculation because there is no history of the new circumstance.
That 201,000 was for Boothbay Harbor or for all the towns?
No, for Boothbay Harbor.
Okay.
Boothbay is 169, 125, Southport's 483, 794 for the fiscal year 2013.
For Boothbay Harbor, what did they go into for that 200?
I'm sorry?
For Boothbay Harbor, what did they go into for that money? What is involved? Did they
What's
set
based on it?
Yeah. Population or?
Oh, you mean
Runs.
the apportionment is roughly 50-50 between population and call volume.
Okay.
It's the same apportionment we've had for a number of years, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
That hasn't changed.
No.
yeah.
As far as individual items in the budget, we have not gone into them at all.
Okay. So the takeaway I'm getting from this is there's a big number coming.
Well, $250,000.
That's a big number to me. And that you are early in the process and have not gone through the budget in detail. And in particular, I guess I would ask, does this incorporate the anticipated capital support that we've heard that Lincoln County Healthcare might be providing?
No, because we haven't received any official document to that effect.
Okay.
And in the budget process, you probably know, it's much better to deal with finite facts.
Yes.
So I have a question. Palmer, are these numbers then, in your opinion, finalized?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. No, this is the initial estimation at a very early stage in the process.
Any other questions from the board?
I would assume that if that 56,000 became a fact, as it sounds like it might, that would have to go into a warrant at town meeting.
Yeah.
It would be a special town meeting.
Special town meeting.
Special
Yeah.
The town meeting would have to occur probably before March.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I
And
mentioned
that
that.
this is an anticipated need starting March 15th.
Well, Palmer, I trust your instincts and your inquiries tremendously, so please go forth and do good work on the Budget Committee.
Well, I'd like to, I've received a couple of calls, and people said there's a 2014 budget estimated out there, which is completely erroneous. I don't know where it came from. And in circumstances like this, hot air gets out faster than the truth.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Helen?
Helen Palmer, Boothbay Harbor, Christopher Palmer. This is also taking in the education they have to have in both the ambulance service and what home health is supposed to be giving to the service for training, extra mileage, taking them to the hospital and back.
I can
Yeah,
explain,
that's-
before you go any further, none of the subcategories has been explored in any way whatsoever.
Not in your area of expertise.
No, before the Budget Committee of the Ambulance Service. We had a preliminary meeting 4 or 5 nights ago, and that's it.
Mhm.
I came tonight because there had been some speculation and some stories that people had told me that weren't true, and I thought I'd come and tell you what few facts there are.
Okay, thank you.
But these are estimated figures in advance. Now we have to go and do the whole fine-tuning process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Yeah.
My name is Shirley Jameson. I live at St. Andrews Village. First, I would like to say that I appreciate the opportunity to address this board. However, I'm really concerned about the lack of support that this board has shown the St. Andrews Task Force, and for Valerie, who represents you. The absolute silence is really overwhelming, especially since the hospital is in this town. What is the matter? Do you not care that the hospital, as we know it, is going to lose its accreditation as a hospital due to the closing of its 24/7 emergency room and the ability to keep patients overnight? This is the only hospital on this peninsula. And the critical access designation is important. Once it's gone, we will never get it back. The towns of Southport, Edgecombe, and Boothbay have all contributed financial support for the costs of this effort, which includes attorney's fees. It is really an embarrassment that this town has remained strangely silent on this issue. I know that there are people of this community, I know that they want to undo what Lincoln County Health has done to us. Maybe we won't succeed, but certainly we won't if we sit back and do nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure that I want to respond to that. I suspect there are others on the board that want to respond to that, but I think the meeting might move along better if we hear from anyone else who has similar comments from the audience, and then we'll respond to the end. Is that okay with the board?
It's fine with me.
Okay, so I'm not ignoring you, but we're deferring the answers till a little bit later. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Dan Jameson, and I also live in St. Andrews Village, but we've moved there after several years on Wall Point, Lobster Cove area. My purpose is to ask the board to support the strategic task force. And I want to express appreciation for Valerie's service on it. And the thing is, the Navigant report on which the decision to close was based on things such as usage and money and things of that nature. It totally ignored the healthcare needs of this peninsula. The state of Maine has the oldest average age in the country, and Lincoln County leads the state of Maine. And Boothbay Harbor.
Yes, I'm well aware of this.
So we live in the oldest community in the country. The community does need a hospital. The thing is, as Shirley said, if we lose the critical access hospital designation, we'll never get it back because the rules for it have changed since we got it. Now, as we progress in our project, we're hopeful of having another sit-down with Lincoln County Healthcare and hoping to work out some kind of cooperative venture to serve the community. If we don't, well, we'll have to come up with some alternative plan. And the thing is, if the community is supportive of an effort to have a rural community hospital, we can do it. The thing is, this community has done a number of things that people said couldn't be done. YMCA, when it was in the planning stage, the YMCA hierarchy said, the community won't support a YMCA. Well, look at it. The Opera House, look what's been done to restore the Opera House. The Land Trust and its myriad of walking trails throughout the area. The Botanical Garden, we've gone on and on and on. The thing is that this community is very resourceful. one of the reasons we love it so much. And so that, you know, if you know, if the support is there, we can do it. And I might mention that St. Andrew's Hospital has operated in the black for the last 2 years. Anyway, we know that you voted not to do it at this time, which was a couple of weeks ago.
We actually didn't vote. But
Okay.
it was
But
my
we-
statement that we were not
Anyway,
planning on doing it at this
yeah,
time.
So we hope that you'll reconsider it and give us some support.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Carol Murtaugh, and first I'd like to start out by thanking every one of you, I never have done this before, for serving in the positions you serve, particularly you, Valerie. When I was very young, years ago, and it was years ago, I ran my husband's campaign in New Jersey to be a, we call them council person in New Jersey. Actually mayor, he won by 12 points. Actually, we lost. I can't believe the time he spent away from me. Actually, maybe I didn't lose. Anyway, so thank you so much. Having said that, I would like to say that I'm rather disappointed and embarrassed by your failure to give money to the task force, because we're the only, I mean, here we are, that, you know, it's right in our backyard, so to speak, and I realize it's beautiful Waterview land, and I realize what that means, but I am amazed that you voted, or I'm sorry, you didn't vote, I just learned now, you decided unilaterally or whatever, oligarchically, I don't know, anyway, you decided not to pay, and I would like to ask you to please reconsider that, and I do not like taking up collections, neither do I like contributing to them. But I'm thinking of running a collection down at St. Andrew's Village where I live. These people are my next door neighbors. They're wonderful, very quiet people and so forth. And you wouldn't think so, would you? But I'm thinking of running a collection. And if I have your permission, or even if I don't, I'm going to contribute it in your name so we won't be so embarrassed up at the inn. And of course, that doesn't preclude you changing your mind, reconsidering, and maybe giving some money the way the other 3 towns on the peninsula have, and thank you again for your service. I really, really honestly mean it. I appreciate it, and I know what you, and particularly what your wives, go through in your husband. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Margaret Parrott, and I live in Boothbay Harbor, and I have rental property here. I bring visitors into the community, and think that it's very important that we maintain some effective healthcare presence here in the community. But I would speak to you tonight just simply as a resident of Boothbay Harbor and ask you to make a token donation, which is all the other towns have done, out of your emergency fund to the effort, just to let us be able to hold our heads up when we go to meetings and they say, what is wrong with Boothbay Harbor, that they can't get in this with us. And I know that seems like a frivolous request, but I'm making it. Just, it's a matter of community pride. That's it, pure and simple.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Bob Kelly from Boothbay Harbor, from the St. Andrews Village. And I guess I'd like to ask just a simple question, independent of financing. Are you, as a board, in sympathy and supportive of the efforts of the task force?
I have actually quite an answer to that question, so bear with me. We had one more hand up.
Thanks. Wendy Wolf, West Boothbay Harbor. I just have a point of information, because I know Palmer was talking about the ambulance budget and that there would have to be a town warrant for additional spending. I'm just curious in terms of the parameters around adding additional discretionary spending that has not been in the budget. I just wanted to be clarified about what the discretion is of the selectmen in that regard, because your responsibility obviously is to all the taxpayers in terms of maintaining the budget, and I just want that point of information as a clarification so we know. Thanks.
Thanks. Anyone else? Going once, going twice? Palmer?
No, I think what Wendy is talking about is an orderly legal process by which you give away the taxpayers' money.
Yeah, I'm going to address that.
It's a good idea to go through it.
We're going to address that, absolutely.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Going once, going twice?
I'm not from Jane Good. I'm not from Boothbay. I'm from Southport. And I speak at this time.
Does anybody have any problem with that?
Yes, I do. This is our meeting. This is Boothbay Harbor meeting. And it's by discretion of the board, so if the board wish, the board should take a vote.
Let's have a vote. All those in favor of allowing her to speak? All those opposed? Motion carries. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for your consideration. My involvement with the task force mainly is because of some of the people that are in this room. And they're here tonight with a lot of sadness and heavy hearts. We've had 3 other boards that haven't had to go through this process. I don't understand. Now, I'm sure you've got an explanation, and I'm really anxious to hear it. But we've had not one bit of hesitation from Edgecombe, Southport, or Boothbay. This business, I would like personally to hear from each one of you individually how you feel about this. You work for the people of this town. You have 50 people or more that have lost their jobs in this town. You have elderly people here who thought they were going to have health care to the end of their life. Now, this might not be a crisis for you. Any of you have any wives or brothers or sisters or aunts or uncles that work at that hospital that are losing their jobs, that are losing their health insurance? 50 jobs in this community is a big hit. I'd like to hear from you personally, each and every one of you, how you feel about this. And then, Mr. Hanlon, you can give your glorious report. Thank you.
Are we done? Going once, going twice? I have heard several questions, mostly concerned with lack of support of this board for the task force. Also, I've heard comments about us using our emergency fund, and I've heard comments and questions about what the process is for dispersing taxpayer funds, which is, I think, a core issue here. First of all, I would ask you not to confuse supporting the task force with ability to donate taxpayer funds to the task force. Those are 2 separate things. This board supports the task force. We have continually supported the task force. We voted unanimously to create the task force. We voted to appoint Valerie, who's been a diligent and tireless worker on the task force. We voted unanimously to support the task force with a resolution that says the Boothbay Harbor Selectmen fully support the regional task force to explore strategies to support St. Andrews Hospital and provide the best health care possible for the citizens of Boothbay Harbor in the region. I personally have attended the majority of meetings, and I've watched every meeting that I've missed on the Channel 7 website. I personally have donated to the task force. You should not question the support of this board to the task force, and that's my personal opinion, and these other selectmen can answer to that as well. But we support the task force. Well, if we support the task force, why aren't we giving money to the task force? Donating taxpayers' money is not within the scope of the selectmen's authority. The town meeting decides money issues. There is no emergency fund, there is no slush fund, there is no selectmen's discretionary funds. We have talked about that, in fact, because of this issue and other issues that have come up this year, about including that in next year's budget. But there is none in this year's budget. All right? So there is not an ability to do that. There is an emergency provision, and I'll read you that provision word for word in a few minutes.
I have that, Mr. Chairman, as a matter of presentation.
All right, then I'll wait till Mr. Spillane presents that. We've been very consistent on this issue. There was a quote from me about a month ago on another topic where there was some beautification work for the footbridge, and Mike Tomko, our planning board chairman, said, you know, the town just got a gift of $5,000 from the Opera House, for which we were very grateful. It wasn't money we planned on having. Why don't we give it to the footbridge? But we didn't. And what I said at the time is spending taxpayers' money is a big deal, and I don't want to short-circuit that process. And I believe if we were to vote to give that money to the task force or the footbridge or anything else without going through town meeting or at least a referendum, we would be short-circuiting that process. And this town was in financial straits 5 years ago. We were underwater, and I think we'll hear more from that from Mr. Spillane. And I think it's an important process to pay attention to. So I would be happy to vote in the affirmative for monies for the task force once I had the taxpayers' authority, but I don't feel we do. I have some more comments on the structure of the task force, but I'll perhaps leave those to later.
If you yield the floor to me.
I would gladly yield the floor to you.
I figured you might. I'll stand if you don't mind, because it's easier for me to talk that way and operate the computer. I would like to give you my opinion. You've eloquently given yours. And if I can make my computer work, there it goes. What's happening to the hospital? Well, we've been told that it's moving. And I promise not to take much time. So, what is the move statement by Lincoln County Healthcare initiated? It certainly raised some strong emotions in some people, and that's quite evident from words I've heard this evening. From outrage to acceptance of the situation. Some of you have concerns over increases in property taxes and their representation in the decision-making process with regard to local funding in support of an alternative to the move. Others have employment concerns, and those are all concerns I've heard. And I'm not for or against any of those. I'm interested in the process, as I believe Mr. Hamblin and the town. And I'm not sure, and we're not sure, of the representation of the people, and we have to be sure of that. This is a municipal government. This is where government starts in our nation, right here. We're elected by the people to judge the suitability, the accuracy of situations, and to make those recommendations to the people that elect us. All 5 of us do that, and Boothbay Harbor is diligent in that respect. Of course, it created the task force, which consists of a group of dedicated and sincere elected municipal officers. I think that every one of the task force people are great people, and they're doing a good job. We elected them, as Mr. Hamblin said. We elected our representative as a means to find out what is happening on the task force, to report to us so that we can understand what you're saying and what is happening. That's what the task force is doing. For the moment, it seems that these municipal officers, one from each town, is under the general direction of the town manager of Boothbay, who has become the voice of the task force and its activities. The task force has been meeting weekly with the apparent support of the people and municipality of Boothbay to determine an alternative to the proposed move of the hospital. Media support, comment on the activity of the task force has been provided by the Boothbay Register and by its website, so we're kept fairly well informed. Meetings are held weekly, and some volunteers have been engaged in raising funds. It's difficult and dedicated work. Local political activists and state representatives have been engaged in the process, leading to the suggestion of a locally funded hospital. All those things are in the public domain. But there's municipal law as well. The municipality does not have an emergency fund. There is no such thing here in Boothbay. Or a discretionary fund, or a contingency fund, or a slush fund, as some refer to it. We do have an undesignated fund, and that's what it is. It's undesignated. And it has a specific amount of money that we must collect from you, the taxpayers of Boothbay Harbor, to keep for a very specific reason. Not to give away, but to use for very specific reasons. Mr. Wooden can't give that money away. We can't give that money away. Here is the actual wording from our code book. Our code book is our charter, which we operate under as a government. At any time, the Board of Selectmen may make emergency expenditures from the undesignated fund balance to meet an essential need for expenditures to protect the public health, safety, or welfare. Such emergencies consist of natural disasters, a sudden anticipated event, or severe economic decline, which requires a response by the municipal officers in less time than ordinarily necessary to notify the general public. That means if something happens tonight, or within possibly the next few days, we have to, or we may, recommend that we spend some money to fix it. An appropriation request by the Board of Selectmen for an emergency expenditure has to contain the amount of the funds requested, the precise use and the purpose of the funds, and a plan to restore the funds. Any other urgent need not included in the budget shall require a notice and public hearing before any funds are expended from the undesignated fund balance. Voluntary contributions do not meet the criteria for an emergency authorizing the use of undesignated funds. So it creates a quandary. The municipality of Boothbay Harbor is forbidden by its charter to bring legal action against anyone. This is another issue that we've been advised of. We can't do it unless all 5 of us agree unanimously. The use of taxpayer funds is forbidden by the charter of the municipality of Boothbay Harbor unless approved by the residents of the town in a referendum and approved as part of the budget warrant at our town meeting. Those are facts. There is only one pot of money in Boothbay Harbor. Just one. There are no other pots of money. And it comes from your property taxes. That's the only place it comes from. Where are we today? Legal or quasi-legal actions are proposed by the task force against the hospital move, according to feedback from our Boothbay Harbor Task Force representative. Our representative has suggested publicly and under considerable pressure that this municipality may provide funding to the task force from Boothbay Harbor taxpayer funds, emergency funds. Well, we can't do that. The difficult position of municipal officers in stating publicly what their municipality will do, what will we do, what can I do? If I'm at a meeting and somebody asks me, what will Boothbay Harbor do? I can't answer that question. I have to take these people into account and 2,711 taxpayers in Boothbay Harbor. The difficult position of municipal officers in stating politically what their municipality will do is ultimately subject to the approval of the residents of each of their municipalities. In other words, someone from Boothbay has been made a municipal officer by election to represent people in Boothbay. I don't represent people in Boothbay. They're not my people. You're my people. How can we improve the situation? Perhaps we should reformat and perhaps incorporate the hardworking task force to a non-municipal format. This would be a low-cost, simple action that may provide an independent status for the task force. The task force right now is too tied to Boothbay. It should really be an independent task force, independent of the boards. Valerie does a good job. Valerie would still be able to be on the task force, but she wouldn't be under the pressure as a selectman from Boothbay Harbor. Sorry, Valerie, a select person. Such a reorganization of the task force would remove the conflict from the municipal representatives representing their boards of selectmen from having to make decisions under peer pressure. In closing, many of us here remember, and Bill mentioned this earlier, only too well, that less than 6 years ago, this town was broke. I hate to use that word, but this town was broke. And it was in the red. We had money that we didn't have. We were one of the few municipalities that said, we've got money. We sure did. We had $2,224 less than nothing. Today, because of the dedicated fiscal sense of various of us who have served and continue to serve, along with the town manager that we hired at that time 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, Tom organized our financial budgets, and we've been able to rebuild our financial house and not raise taxes. It looks like the ambulance service might have done us out of that, but we have consistently followed our town charter and examined each call fully and submitted the recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, the Budget Committee, and we've asked the people of Boothbay Harbor to vote on those recommendations. Let me just say one thing about municipal government. We are selectmen. What are we in terms of government? We're adjudicators. We're judges of a cause. When someone brings a problem before this board, we judge its rightness or wrongness. That's not very good English, but it works for me. We judge it. We pass that in terms of a written statement we sometimes call a warrant. We post it, and we say to the people of the town, all 2,711 people of the town, how do you feel about this? Put your money where your mouth is. Vote for it, or don't vote for it. And if you don't vote for it, okay, we don't spend the money. If they vote for it, we spend the money. It's hard enough to get to the warrant, to get an agreement of 5 people. We manage somehow each year to do it. Some of us get reelected. Some of us wish we hadn't been. We do follow our town charter. And we examine each cause fully. And I see no reason why we wouldn't do that regarding the hospital. I would point out that our budget, the very document that we grab every 2 weeks, we asked Ms. Latter in the back, our financial secretary, to tell us how are we doing against last year, because it's your money. What else do? We have a warrant, which is a list of checks that we've paid out this week, $440,000 this week. And we go through them before we sign this warrant and say this is a legitimate expense or not. We keep our eye on Jody Lewis's budget, Tom's budget, our budget, the people of this town's budget, Mrs. Farnham's budget. It's all in here. Mr. Chairman, as you are aware, there is no emergency fund that might assist the task force. Requests for funding need to follow appropriate, well-tried principles in our charter, and will ensure that the people are properly represented by us through due process, a process we have sworn to uphold. I see no reason to change that now over this issue. I believe that I could probably make a very sympathetic case for making donations. I'm not authorized to make donations. It's not my money. It's your money. And with all due respect to those people that spoke this evening, there are some of you here. There's 5 of us. And there's some of you. But this peninsula, the 4 towns we talk about, has a population, and I always smile when I think of the statistic that I keep on my refrigerator on the side. It has a population winter population of about 6,000, maybe 6,500 people in the towns that we've talked about so openly tonight, Edgecombe, Boothbay Harbor, and Southport. We have a magnificent summer population, something like 28,000. It's quite amazing. It's almost a 5-to-1 change in the demographic. Yet, as a selectman, I've been a selectman here for 5 years. I have another 3, unfortunately, to serve. The thing is that we have no real measure of what the public support is for or against keeping the hospital. You dedicated people want to keep it. How many don't? And how many do not want to spend public taxpayer funds? I started to say a minute ago, our budget is about $8 million in a year. About $8 million. That $8 million comes from where? It comes from you, by and large. That's what it's all about. We've collected $3 million from you so far this year. We have another $5 million to collect. So keep your checkbook handy, and Palmer, keep the ambulance guys down. Okay. But we'll end up with $8 million. I've looked at some of the financial requirements of keeping the Boothbay Harbor Hospital open. Should we do it ourselves? It would certainly double our budget. It would double our property taxes. It's our only source of revenue. If you can double your property taxes, if we were to do that, I think Mrs. Farnham would be right. There'd be nobody here in 10 years from now. So we have to be very careful how we approach this. We have to do it properly. We have to get the task force reset up, in my opinion, so that it no longer is attached directly to each municipality. Pitting one municipality against another is not good politics, and it's certainly not a good practice. Let's just try and get some figure before the people of Boothbay Harbor so that we can put it on a warrant, so that there can be an appropriate referendum and vote, so that this board can judge just how we should proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Other selectmen at this time?
Yeah.
JD?
I'm JD Warren. When I looked over I'm a sort of a standard man myself all my life, that's what I've done. And when I started looking at the standards and how the town is run and how the municipality money is dealt out, I was unfortunately, and I do sympathize with everybody in this room. I was an ambulance service director. I was on the ambulance for 11 years. So I have sympathy for everyone in this room, and I do support the task force. But the issue is when I looked at the funding and how we're going to do this, and it was before my time made these regulations, and I know maybe other towns have other regulations, but when I started looking at this book and trying to figure out where is this money going to come from, how are we going to do this and do it legally without my interpretation, we have to have the support of the voters, the taxpayers, and that's what I represent. I represent the taxpayers of Boothbay Harbor to ensure that we do not spend or overspend what we should spend, and that's my feeling on that. And I really sympathize, like I say, sympathize with everybody in this room. But you know, when it comes to funding of municipalities versus private enterprise, I have a problem with that, and I have always had a problem with that. In other jobs that I had problems of state funding going into private enterprise. And that's where I stand. So until we can have another way of doing it, of course, I would support it. And that's what I have to say about it. Thank you.
Thanks, JD.
I also support the task force 100%. I was born here, born at the hospital. My parents received great care there. I personally made a donation to the committee, but I think we have to go through our town process to get more funds from the town for the task force.
Thanks. Valerie, I guess you're last. I just want to say, we have put Valerie, by the nature of this, in a very difficult position, and she has handled this with dignity and forthrightness and aplomb, and she's done a terrific job for us. That's my personal feeling.
Thanks. Oh, I feel like you're all waiting for me, but I would have to say I agree with the other selectmen about not committing the taxpayers' money without going to the proper channels. And obviously I struggled with that decision, and I know we think $500 isn't a lot in the big scheme of what our budget is, and Margaret, I agree with you that it's a token amount, and that's probably what the other towns were thinking as well, but there are a lot of great causes out there as well. And when you start asking for token amounts to all of those great causes, and they do come to us and ask us outside of the budget process, I just worry about setting a precedent. And I have to, when I'm sitting at this table, think about the bigger picture of Boothbay Harbor's budget and its yearly process. And so that's my opinion on it.
Thank you. I guess I would, with the board's indulgence, like to make a comment on Bob's discussion of the structure of the task force. The structure of the task force as essentially a subcommittee of multiple select boards is a unique structure, and it has its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that initially it could be quickly formed, and we voted to form it. It ensured good representations of our towns. It was a cross-section of the peninsula. It could get going quickly. It had authority to do things. But now that it's up and running, I think it has some serious drawbacks. And to me, the two biggest drawbacks of the current structure of the task force is, and I think Bob may have mentioned this, the first is, by law, only a vote of the selectmen can enter into legal action. And if the task force is going to pursue legal action, and I think it's entirely an avenue that they should be pursuing and are pursuing, and we're told constantly we're going to see a product in the near future. But we asked this question of our town lawyer, and he was fairly clear and fairly concise in that if the task force properly wants to take legal action, they really should be going back to each of the select boards and getting a unanimous vote. That could be hard to do, and we better do it right, because if we do it wrong, we'll lose from the start, and any case that the task force brings will be thrown out on procedural grounds. So I think that's a drawback for the task force right now, and a drawback that wouldn't exist if they were a LLC or a regional committee. Then they could operate in a fashion that they so choose, and they could bring suits without going back to each of the towns. And the second issue where I think the current structure is a drawback is they can't meet in private. They can't meet in private. It has to be a public meeting. They can't meet with Lincoln County Healthcare in private, or any other entity except their lawyer. And every successful negotiation that I'm aware of really starts with a small number of people sitting around a table in a room without the glare of the media, forgive me the register, being able to talk directly and frankly to one another about what they want to accomplish. And they can't do that. And I despair for their likelihood of success with their inability to do that. It's not possible in the current organization. So I would agree with Bob's recommendation. My recommendation is the task force should divest itself from the municipal structure and become its own independent entity, and then they can proceed to raise money without any issues. They can come to the towns and request money, as other organizations do, as the public library do, as other organizations have done. So it doesn't preclude the town from providing funding if the taxpayers so wish that. They could meet in private, they could negotiate, and one thing that Dan said that I really resonated with is the concept of of working now perhaps to a cooperative adventure. I certainly support the task force. That doesn't mean I support everything they've said and done. And one thing in particular is I personally would rather have seen a collaborative approach to a solution than an adversarial approach to the solution. And I think it would be more efficient if we could have a collaborative approach. I think it has a greater chance of success. I think it's more efficient in terms of manpower and expertise. I think it would be better for our town and our community, inclusive rather than divisive. That's my personal viewpoint. That's not necessarily the viewpoint of the board, but that's how I feel on this issue.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, I see, my problem was when I found out and read that there was a legal action going to be taken, I did not hear from the task force. Valerie does a very good job. My question is, what legal action is the task force going to take? And I need to know that as a select person, and I was not told that. So that's, I don't want to get the town into trouble or whatever. And that's a situation that I think needs to look into what are we doing. And our lawyer, the town lawyer, was pretty specific in what he said and how we can go forth with any of this. So I want to make it perfectly clear that if you are going that route, we need to know exactly what you're doing as to the legal situation of St. Andrews. Remember, I was born at St. Andrews, and also Dr. Phil Gregory delivered me. So I'm just saying, I don't know if a lot of you in this room know about the legal things going on or not. I have no idea. But when that came up on my email, legal, that puts a red flag in my mind, okay? And I want to know from the task force exactly what you're doing. Thank you.
I guess I have a comment to that. Just to let everybody in this room know, and you, Jay, that I haven't hidden anything
I know that.
The task force is doing. I've been
You've done a very
clear
good job.
about what the legal issue is, and we had an executive session at the last meeting, which was a few weeks ago, where I shared with you all of the information that I knew at that time for the legal. So you're up to date as of that executive session with what the movement is for that.
It's okay. You did a good job.
Okay, we are currently on old business. Well, we had our public forum, first public forum, we ended that. We need to conduct our business, and then we will have the second public forum, and then the audience can comment at that time. So our business was the St. Andrews Task Force Activity Report. I would take, we've pretty much had that covered. And we got your notification in our inboxes. But if there's something more you want to say, please say it.
Not my notification.
Oh, okay.
I'd just like to say thank you for your, the opportunity and the attention.
Well, you're welcome. That's what we're here for.
Well, just the regular task force update on the work groups, in case you haven't been reading the register coverage, which is pretty transparent about what we're up to. But the community hospital work group is still entitled the community hospital work group, but they have changed tacks and are looking at putting together a proposal, which they are calling the second opinion, which they will have a consultant come in and do a professional study of the health needs of our community. That is meant to be a second opinion to the Navigant report. So that's what that work group is up to. The data analysis, if you didn't see Channel 7, Andrew Twaddle's report was amazing, and it really does continue to amaze me about how much intellect and experience is working on the task force, and he's put together a really fantastic binder, organized into all separate sections for data, along with summaries of each section, so that if you don't, which you probably don't want to read all those pages of data, you can just read his summaries, and that's at the Boothbay Town Office at the data binder. But basically, Mr. Twaddle talked about some of the studies that I imagine the second opinion proposal will get into, which is about our population and our healthcare needs, and he's looked into that as well already. The ambulance work group, we heard from Palmer, they did start to meet with their budget committee, so they're just in the beginning steps of that process, and working with Lincoln County Healthcare. I believe they're planning on working with Lincoln County Healthcare for what kinds of numbers they can come up with in terms of their pledged support to the ambulance service. The Lincoln County Regional Planning Group didn't have much of an update because they were going to be meeting soon. So, shoot, what's today's date? They were meeting the 17th, which was the day after our meeting last week. We will have representation at some of the events coming up, like the Senior Day and the Early Bird Shopping event in Boothbay Harbor, as well as at the polls. And I wanted to ask you, Tom, have they approached us about being here during our polls? Okay. Yep. So the task force has a polling question that they'll be asking community members to sign if they agree with the question at hand. And actually, I have that question here. Sorry, I should have written this out. Patty, do you remember what the polling question is? Oh, here we go. We, the undersigned of your town of residence, support maintaining the status of a critical access hospital at St. Andrew's Hospital. So that's the polling question, fairly simple. So if you'd like to support that question, I'm sure it will be at all of the polls in the area on November 6th. So you can sign your name to support it. And I think that was about it.
Thank you. Anybody else on this topic before we move on? The next agenda item is new business, and we have one additional item under that, and that is, Tom, you've received information from the state?
Yeah, the state legislature has amended some of the Freedom of Access Act requirements, and one of the changes that they have made is that each municipality must designate a public access officer to complete a course of training and ensure, among other duties, that requests for public records are acknowledged within a reasonable period of time. In reality, that's what I've been doing all along, but they've given it a formal title. So I would ask the board to appoint me as Boothbay Harbor's public access officer.
I would entertain a motion to that effect.
I reluctantly make such a motion.
I reluctantly accept.
It's been reluctantly motioned and seconded that we appoint Tom Wooden, the town manager, our public information officer under the Maine's Freedom of Information Access Act. Is there any further discussion on this topic? All in favor? It's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to introduce a topic. I promised I would on behalf of two of our illustrious guests here this evening, Mr. Bruce Enger and Mr. Mike Tomko, who are both part owners of, indirectly, of a pond. And the pond has become full of unfriendly things to the pond. Weeds, reeds, and such. I believe that there is a third party involved. One, I think, let's see, Mrs. Margaret Griffin, I think, is involved, who is Chip Griffin's mother. I think she owns some portion, I'm sorry, there's a representative here. There's a portion of that pond that is involved in that. They're requesting some assistance in cleaning out this pond from these reeds, weeds, and fauna, I suppose one would say, that seems to be some detraction, from indigenous wildlife, such as wild turkeys, and second, the pond has a tendency, I'm sure you all know where this pond is on Rhodes End, has a tendency to overflood, since it's only about 1 foot deep now of its original some 5, possibly 15 feet depth. And as it does that, I'm told that it has a severe effect on other local aquatic indigenous sea life, such as oysters and so on, and that has caused some problems. The request by the parties involved is, can we do something to improve the pond? Can we clean it out? I think I've stated very broadly the request that I've offered to introduce, but I'm introducing it with no solution. So
Okay.
the solution is entirely up to the board.
Can I ask, what is the reason the municipality would be involved in a pond that is in private ownership?
I would strongly urge that you address those questions to
Bruce?
the bringers of the problem.
I'm Bruce Engert, 58 Rhodes End. I moved here in 1985. The pond is actually divided into 3 separate sections. Half of it is within my boundaries. The other half is divided between the Griffin property and now Howard,
Okay.
Mike's issue or interest in the pond. What I wanted to make you aware of is a little bit of the history. And it goes back quite a ways, back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. And I really don't know which happened first, whether the then cove, which is where the pond is, the eastern end of that cove, whether that dike that was built across to accommodate Rhodes End was put there as a result of needing to get to a bone factory, or whether it was built as a result of the Fred B. Higgins Lobster Company, which has a lobster pound, or did have a lobster pound there, David Bean now being the owner. So I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but I do know that it created a pond. Now the pond is basically a subsurface or runoff from, let's say, Atlantic Avenue, and even probably further up the hill.
Yeah, from Sunset, yeah.
It is not really defined as a stream, a great pond, a river, or a coastal wetland. It's really a runoff pond. And the reason that it's important is that it prevents the fresh water from going across the dike or the road into the lobster pound, which is still in use, and kills the lobsters that are pounded there, which David, I think, can elaborate on. When I first moved into town, the pond, by measure of Lawrence Durfee and myself in a rowboat, was about 8 to 10 feet deep in the middle. That now is about, at the very, very deepest part, 2 feet. And you say, well, how did it happen? Well, it started when Spruce Point Inn decided to put a sewer line and water line out to the resort. Now, what happened to the stormwater runoff coming down the hill I really don't have an accurate answer for you, other than to say that it came down over the hill and it came into the pond, and we do have pictures that show it as milky as a coffee milkshake, actually, and you can see it coming through the streams down on the eastern end of the pond. So that's when it started, and the town manager then, the public works director then, and a majority of the select board then inspected it personally, and they were going to, in fact, they had Crooker Construction and other contractors, local contractors out there, with the intent of dredging it out to create the same capacity that it had, let's say, back in the 50s or 60s, which was to, again, safeguard the lobster pound across the street. Next thing that happened was the runout, or the culvert that goes from the southern end of the pond down, well, actually it went across my property and then into the road and across the Norweb property and drained into the ocean, was replaced with a plastic culvert by Neil Rennie. I don't think that had anything to do with much of anything other than replacing the culvert, although I'm not sure of the elevation of the outfall. I do know that it was a very, very flat situation, maybe an 1/8 of an inch pitch at best.
Has the level of the pond stayed roughly constant?
No. Then we have, as of late, a issue with the development across the street from Atlantic Avenue subdivision that was required to provide retention ponds for soil erosion to eliminate this from happening. That really hasn't worked well, and I think you need to understand a little bit, or at least I will try to help you with a little bit of that philosophy. And that is that if you have a runoff swale, again, not a creek, not a river, not a stream, running downhill, the idea is that that water will puddle in certain areas, which slows the velocity of the water downhill. And why is that important? Because the velocity of the water going downhill is what creates the rills and the chiseled channels that create the erosion and sediment that comes downhill with it. So, from my perspective, that's what's happened. Well, why has it gotten worse in the last year? It's gotten tremendously more evident in the last year because Jody and the Public Works Department went up to Maggie Griffin's, and between her house and Atlantic Avenue, dug out all of those rills where the water was coming down from Atlantic Avenue and down the hill, and created a situation where now you have no stopping of the velocity of water going down these streams, if you will, down these rills. So what's happened is we have a delta now that has built up. I didn't bring you any pictures, but I do have it on my cell phone if you want to look at that, or I can bring you some pictures. It's predominantly on the northwesterly side of the pond, and they're reeds, quite large. You care to drive by and take a look at it. And now it's working its way over on my side of the pond, on the easterly end of it, and there's a sandbar there, which was never there before. Now this is all as a result of the town works digging those rills and water passageways down the hill to a more direct course without slowing the velocity of the water. So it's bringing soil and silt down with it. And it's filling in the pond at a rapid rate now. Why would we ask the town to help with getting that taken out? Because it's the town that created the problem.
Okay, so what my takeaway is that about a year ago, you said?
Well,
Jody?
a year ago, he did this work for last fall, I think.
Yeah, the connection I heard was a year ago Jody did this work, and that's causing the increased velocity down the hill, and that's caused additional sediment to be brought down the hill and ended up in the pond. And so that's the reason why the municipality should have an interest in this.
That's part of it. The rest of it is, as I stated, going back to the water.
Yeah, I didn't hear an argument there that involved the municipality. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Well, the bottom line is that the pond is going to get, without any question, it's going to be, it doesn't have the capacity now. You've seen the picture that Tom or Mike
Yeah, I want
has given you. And it is going to eventually erode that dike that was built, and it is currently running into the lobster pound.
Dredging the pond deeper will not increase its storage capacity for water. If I have a glass that's a 2-ounce glass and it's filled within a ½ inch, and I dump water on top till it overflows, it overflows. It overflows. The exact same point is if I had an 8-ounce glass filled with a ½ inch.
I agree with that.
That's why I asked what the level of the pond is done.
It is the velocity of the water and the volume of water that is.
I buy the velocity.
Glass.
I buy the velocity. I buy slowing down velocity. I don't buy that.
If you pour the water into your glass with a huge pitcher,
I buy the velocity.
it's going to overflow at a much more rapid rate than it is if you fill that water.
I buy the velocity. I don't buy that dredging it will increase your capacity.
Then I would ask you to explain for the past 100 years why it has worked flawlessly and now all of a sudden it isn't.
Because you've told me that the velocity of the water is increased. I told you I buy that part. Okay, the part I don't buy is that dredging it would increase the capacity of that pond to store water. It wouldn't. Slowing down the water would increase the ability. Okay, that's my only point. I got to tell you, I owned exactly such a pond in my lifetime, and I have pictures of mine the color of coffee because some guy upstream did exactly what they did to your pond. And my pond silted in as well. It was 10 feet deep when I started, and it was 4 feet deep when I left. So I understand all this. Would Jody agree with you that his actions caused the increased velocity of water?
Jody had said to me, I have asked him on numerous occasions. He came down and he agreed to stabilize the roadside with some stone, which was a mediocre attempt to do such, to stabilize it. But Jody has agreed over the past 2 or 3 years that he would come down and take care of that silt that was building up after the busy summer season. Well, this year, because it is so prevalent and so obvious, I went to him again this spring and he said, yeah, when we're not busy, we'll come down. And when I queried him last, he said, well, I took it to the town manager and the town manager said no, that we didn't have that on the radar screen for, we just weren't going to be able to do it.
Okay.
So Jody has said no, the town manager says no, so I contacted Mr. Spillane, asked him for some assistance, asked him to bring it before the board.
Okay.
So here we are. It's not just myself, it's the other concerned citizens.
Understood. I'm still just trying to fact find. Would the DEP agree with you that this is not a stream, a pond, a great pond, et cetera?
Yes.
So we would not need a permit?
At the very worst, a permit by rule, but my understanding is that isn't even necessary. Now, NERPA may step in and say, yeah, you need a tier 1 permit, which is under a quarter of an acre. That's not a problem.
Okay.
I can take care of getting those permits if they're necessary, but I'm told in my vocation by those people who run the DEP shoreland zoning that isn't an issue.
I personally might want to see either a letter or the permits before we move ahead, but you say that's no problem, so we can set that aside.
I will take care of doing that.
Bruce, that's what I wanted to see. Has DEP looked at that at all?
I think they did back when, and I'm going to say it was in it would have been the late 80s, early 90s, when Hans, whatever his name was, Public Works Director.
Yeah.
I know. Laurie Smith. In fact, Palmer may have been involved back then.
I was.
There you go.
1999 and 2000, when I was a selectman, we all gathered by this pond and were shown where it was supposed to be higher than it was. It was somehow resolved, and I can't tell you how, but it should be a record as to what happened.
What happened was
13 years ago.
The board,
On the other hand, if you let it fill up, you'll have greater enhanced property.
Will that mean more taxes for us?
I'm sorry?
Will that mean more taxes for the town?
Of course.
Yeah.
Reassess.
Bruce, I'd like to see a lot of, I have DEP check it out,
Absolutely, that's not a problem.
okay? I'd rather, because that could be wetlands. Could be.
Yes, sir.
Dave Bean, Bristol Lobster Sales. We've got the lobster pound on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
Try to make it real quick, but Dad bought that roughly in '62. And at that point in time, the pond wasn't really an issue. Over the years, as everything has developed up above, say, up in, well, the next road up there.
Yeah.
The last 10, probably 13 years, it's really become an issue. I think everything must get piped down from up there through the woods or whatever that Bruce was talking about. So that stream and that pond has really filled up with all that soot. And now it has really filled up in the last year, I guess, because of what Bruce just said. But it's been an ongoing thing. It's really been building up over the last 10 or 12 years. About 30 years ago, Dad cut a deal with the town. And the town paid for half of the culvert, and my father paid for the other half of the culvert. And they put in a new one. And a little while ago, I don't know how many years ago it was, probably 15 years ago, when they put the plastic one in there, was it that long ago? And I think it was Alan Lewis and stuff, I can still remember him being down there, and he's the one that he was working at the end of the road, doing some work on the seawall down there, and he was kind of like overseeing the thing as a friend of mine, and there was hardly any pitch at all. It's a fairly good sized culvert, it's probably that big around.
Yeah, I've been down there.
And at the time was handling the water pretty good, but it's a tidal thing. When you get a real big rain, it's if you get a high tide, that water's not going anywhere. It doesn't matter if the
I was down there the other day, it was over the road.
Yeah.
Because I mow down there, so I know.
So we've gone, when Dad was alive, we probably went 20 years, and I think probably overflowed maybe one time. And probably in the last 10 years, it probably overflows about 4 or 5 times a year. And that's cut down on me being able to use the lobster pound. I mean, I can't put 25,000 pounds of lobsters in there and get them out of there in 3 hours if we've got a lot of rain coming.
I'm concerned about that issue. That was a major concern when we looked at the development up on Atlantic Ave, that there'd be no net increase down through there because we didn't want it affecting the lobster pound at all.
And that's been huge. And because of that, where we can't utilize it, I mean, for dollars and cents, it's probably cost me like $80,000 a year. If things worked right, that's how much you probably would make.
I buy the argument that there may be no net increase in flow, but if the velocity is increased, then it's a trouble for you. I buy that.
But, like I said, it is definitely filled up, whether it's from, from the water up above or what's coming down through the middle of the woods now. But it's, like you said, there's no depth there now at all.
Let me ask a question. Would the landowners be amenable to you? What I heard you were asking for was dredging the pond. I'm not so enthusiastic about that part. Would you be amenable to the edges of the pond being reworked to give it more capacity, to give it ability to fill up before it overflowed?
You're there. No. You're already there. Well, the last time that the pond really, really filled up and went over the road was Hurricane Bob.
Mm-hmm.
That, and I have pictures of that. This is June 3rd of this year that you're looking at,
mm-hmm.
and that's what the pond was originally intended to eliminate.
Right.
So that, that's a history of the pond.
Right.
Again, my sentiment, or at least my take on this is that on that northeastern end of the pond, that being Drive Down Road's End over there.
Yeah.
That has filled in with silt and sand that has come down over the hill with these rills that have been exacerbated by the Public Works Department digging them out.
I heard that, but my understanding from a hydrological standpoint is that if you can't slow down that water, let's just, in a perfect world, I think the solution would be to slow down that water.
Yes.
And then you would not have a problem. Everything could stay the same. You wouldn't have to dredge the pond. It would have time.
With the exception of removing the material that has been brought down the hill as a result of the poor engineering of the Public Works.
The material that is underwater does not have an impact on that.
It isn't underwater. It's now above water.
Then I agree with it, and that's what I said. Would the landowners be amenable to reworking the edges of the pond, the parts of the material that's above water, to provide added capacity to that pond.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would do a lot.
Yeah.
That would do a lot for getting
Yeah,
that silt
yeah.
and sand out of there.
Again, I don't see I personally don't see an argument for dredging out the material in the middle of the pond and making it back to 15 feet deep.
No, I'm not talking about the middle. I think that will eventually correct itself.
I think you could gain some capacity and some storage by taking out that material that's at the edge of the pond that used to be available to be filled up with water and now is not. That, from an engineering standpoint, I'm not saying whether it's right, wrong, or different. From an engineering standpoint, that makes sense to me.
That along with slowing somehow, I don't care.
Slowing down would be great. I don't know if that's
bales,
available to us. Yeah. Ma'am.
Harriet Cowdery on Rhodes End Road, adjacent to this.
Yeah.
One other thing besides the culvert coming down, it goes into my basement. So I'm kind of concerned about the velocity, and when we have a heavy rain, I'm not very happy in my basement.
Okay.
So, because it's right behind my house. So I would really like to see it dredged and have more capacity.
Yeah. Well, the capacity comes from the edges, not from dredging the middle. Mike.
Mike Tomko, 59 Rhodes End. I'm going to give you a little bit of history on the engineering that was done for the Spruce Point Woods development. And Danielle Betts was hired for the town's benefit to look at the watershed plan for Spruce Point Woods when they went from a minor to a major subdivision. And she came up with some fabulous recommendations, and the subdivision is actually maintaining a huge portion of the development to keep the wetlands, and actually they're able to now hold more water than before. And I just spoke to Danielle this evening at 6 o'clock before the meeting, and so she's very pleased that the Spruce Point Woods wetlands are being preserved. She said that what Danielle was also tasked with doing was to look at, we asked her not to look at just the Spruce Point Woods subdivision, but to take a cursory look around and to look at some of the other factors that were contributing to stormwater runoff. And this is why we have neighbors, not just down at the pond area, but also others on Rhodes End that are affected by stormwater runoff. And in her analysis, she had determined that there's quite a bit of water that is channelized basically down Sunset.
Yeah.
And picks up velocity and scoots across a number of yards from the top of Rhodes End and across Maggie's, and then does eventually end up in the pond. Danielle had said that this concentration needs to, as you've mentioned, to be somehow slowed down, diverted, and there's a number of ways that can be done. But this is part of a larger problem and probably requires an engineering type of analysis and solution, and she went through and explained to me a number of ways that they would be able to simply model and then to make some type of simple recommendations as to ways to mitigate some of the stormwater issues. She did happen to feel that, and told me that I could speak on her behalf and say that in her professional opinion, she felt that increasing the capacity of the pond through some dredging would be able to help, because she had noted that there are different levels of the pond, and that when it does get dredged, there is an opportunity for it to perk and to move down. So she felt that some dredging would be beneficial. Once that is done and the sandbar that Bruce had mentioned, sort of this delta area, was removed, that there would be an awareness and an ability for the homeowners bordering the pond to actually then take some types of steps to be able to hold the velocity down. Being your representative for Boothbay Harbor to the Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission, I can let you know that there was this year funds available for engineering, for example, to look at issues like this in the town of Damascotta, Wiscasset, Newcastle, and Whitefield. All received up to in the neighborhood of $200 to $2,500 to do projects similar to this. Those funds, it's my understanding, are going to be available next year, and that the town may look at applying for those funds, and to be able to look at doing a greater analysis so that we can, you know, we're not continually
Well,
repeating the same.
as you know and I know from our planning board experience, ever since Sunset was built, there's been a drainage problem over on that side of town.
Right.
There's no question about it.
Right, and so there are steps that can be taken, but they
You-
should be.
You guys are downhill from it.
That's right.
And water does run downhill.
Thank you.
So there are steps that can be thoughtfully engineered, just like the water retention that's being picked up with the Spruce Mountain subdivision. And
Well, I think we ought to go back and make Spruce Point Inn pay for it, since they're the ones who started it. Listen, we've heard a lot from you guys. We've spent a fair amount of time on this. This is new to us tonight. I would, with the board's indulgence, suggest we table this until our next meeting and give our chance to perhaps do a site survey, to talk to Jody. I would ask you to pursue the DEP issue.
Can I add something to this?
Please, Tom.
I mean, first of all, Bruce has not discussed this with me at all, but I did hear about it through Jody last week that this was coming up. So I think Jody asked Jeff Smith at the time to go out and look at the pond last week to see what you might have to get for permits. Jeff took it upon himself last week to send an email to James Rodriguez at the DEP at the state level. And Bruce, I'll be glad to forward this on to you. James sent back a link to the DEP website that says you'd have to fill out the pink section of this application. It also says, since this pond is fed by a stream, the whole system would be regulated as a stream. It's highly unlikely that we would permit the dredging of a stream or this pond with a feeder stream attached. I don't see why one would go through the time and expense of applying for something that is not permittable. So, but I'll be glad to send this to you, and if you can get there okay.
Yeah, I would respond to that and tell you that from my experience over the past 7 or 8 years doing this work in 3 other communities, and speaking with Mike Morris, who is now the acting head of the DEP Shoreland Zoning Department, that this is not a stream. And it does, I mean, it's as simple as that.
We both understand. It's a hurdle that has to be overcome.
Yeah. So
I will put it in your hands.
I'll get him down here, he'll take a look at it.
There is one other hurdle.
I will put it in your hands to overcome that particular hurdle.
We don't have any dredging equipment.
Yeah, I understand that.
That's a hurdle.
Yeah. Anybody else from the board?
No, Jody did, just one thing, Jody did, I asked Jody about dredging equipment if the issue should arise, and he said, we don't have anything like that. But I said, could you rent something like that? And he said, oh, sure, there's people that have a big enough machine that I could use, like you could contract with somebody like Steve Rennie or somebody, something like that. He said, you need a big machine, so that you don't have to build a road and to get in.
Is this on this topic?
Yes. My name's Bob McKay, 14 Rhodes End, the second house in from Atlantic Avenue. And I just want to say for the record that so much water comes down from Sunset that you all know that there's a lake between Sunset and Rhodes End. The water flows like a waterfall down across Jenna Caldwell's property, across my property. Sometimes I've got 4 and 5 inches of water around my basement wall. There's a waterfall that runs over across my property down into Rhodes End. And my next door neighbor on the other side had to dig a drainage ditch across the whole back of his property when he moved in last year. And that's all contributing to water going down to this pond. The big problem is Sunset. That water has got to be retained and stopped in some way because we're all being affected. We've all got water in the basements, and we're having a hell of a time from that.
My personal feeling is slowing down the water is really the key here, and stopping it at Sunset, you're right, is where it really should happen. I don't know if that's within our toolkit, but I agree with your assessment, absolutely.
May I add just one other thing? Two things. This may be the opportunity, I've talked about fonts, our Lincoln County planner, to include a subcommittee with a comprehensive plan that may want to look at stormwater management issues for the town, not just on Rhodes End. It happens to be in our backyard, so we look at it all the time, but also throughout the rest of the town. And if that's the will of the comprehensive plan committee, this may be an opportunity. We all want to keep the harbors looking clean and pristine, and you can't when you've got water gushing down and doing damage to...
Yeah, I worry about the lobster pound. I think that's a
Sure.
real economic issue in town.
The other thing to worry about is, thank you, is the actual condition of the road. There is what's called liquefaction on some sections of the pavement. When it gets flooded, you can walk on it and it floats. So there is damage that's being done to our road as well as the lawn of David's and the seawall that's just being permeated by this water that gushes through. Okay. So that's all. Thank you.
Any other comments from the selectmen? Do you agree with the approach to table this for at least to the next meeting while we do some more homework?
I agree to that.
Do I hear a motion?
Do you want a motion? You don't need a motion.
To table it? I don't?
No. I don't think
All right.
so. We can just table it.
Then it's tabled. I guess officially we're still under new business. Anybody else, any other selectmen have new business to bring up? That brings us to our second public forum, where the audience gets a chance to discuss what we've discussed tonight. And I see two hands up. Ma'am.
Margaret Parrott, again. First of all, I'm on that committee. We're meeting this week. Make sure it's on the docket. Mr. Splain,
yes,
I would like to thank you for your presentation. I think there was a lot of rumbling back here from my friends at St. Andrews Village who have left. But it certainly helped me to understand exactly the dilemma that you all are facing. And having been in similar positions to yours, I appreciate that. And I completely understand your position. However, we're on television. And we who have been working so hard to present the flip side of the coin, the other opinion, are concerned that there are some that it's not misinformation, there are misleading statements that lead the public who watch closely on the television and who read the Boothbay Register. The work that we're doing indicates to us that a hospital continuing at St. Andrews Hospital location with an emergency room, with swing beds, meeting the needs of the community will in no way double anybody's taxes. We have found very, very good evidence that the hospital can support itself. We are visiting other hospitals in the state of Maine, asking crucial questions, and we will have a report that will show you that it will not double anybody's taxes. And I don't want anybody out watching to be alarmed and frightened by the fact that the work that we're doing to make a suggestion, an alternative suggestion, would raise their taxes by that much. I thank you for your presentation, but I would take strong issue with that part of your report. The other thing that I wanted to ask a question. If someone were to come forward and give you a gift of money and say, I want to give this to the town for the specific purpose of fixing the footbridge, whatever, would you honor that request of that gift? Or there was a little something in your report that suggested that maybe donations could not motivate you to make a gift to someone else?
I don't think that was certainly not my intent. We have received, and I'll ask Tom to make sure that I'm saying the right thing. If we were to receive a gift and it was dedicated to a certain purpose, we are empowered as a board to vote on first of all receiving that gift in good faith, and second, we are required, I believe, under our charter, that if that is to be granted to some particular use, then that is certainly well within our capacity and capability.
You could elect not to accept the gift, I suppose.
Well, we could, but I don't think we would.
Yeah, someone sitting up here in the front row tonight suggested that she was going to make such a gift, and I just didn't want that to go, you know.
No,
if
any
it wasn't
gifts we
possible
can
to-
distribute appropriately.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. The other thing that I want you to understand is that we have repeatedly been in conversation, sit down if you will, with Lincoln County Health, however, and we are flexible in our approach. We're trying different things to suggest to Lincoln County Health, and they have consistently and constantly said to us, we are not going to change our minds. So the effort has been made to sit down and have reasoned and very civil discussion on this subject, and we have been told the decision is made. This is what we see as your needs. So we are saying we don't think you have analyzed our needs.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
And thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry I didn't stand up.
Helen?
I have just one comment. And I'm putting this all out to all of you, including the town manager. We meet for workshop meetings every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, from 2 to 4 at the Boothbay Town office. And we meet every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Boothbay Town office. I think the only reason why, and since I am a person from the harbor, this is my opinion only, I can see that there was a little bit of animosity and everything going on, reference the funding, reference a lot of things. And it was mentioned at one time about coming down here and also going on Southport a night to meet over there. But the response that we have felt that we have gotten from the harbor outside of Valerie, and she does a real great job. We don't have any problem with Val. And, but including the town manager, nobody felt really comfortable. And I think if you gentlemen would like to see what we do, hear what we do, be informed of what we do, I'm giving you an open invitation. Come on up. You know, just see what we're trying to accomplish, see what we're doing. Nobody has to agree with anybody, but this is what we're trying to do. So I'm giving you an open invitation to please, please, come on up. We don't bite. Ask Valerie. We really don't. Thank you.
I just comment, Helen, that as I said, I've been to the majority of meetings. The only ones I haven't been is when my wife has been ill, and I've watched them all on TV. So
I realize you've been up there.
we've been there.
But I've not seen any of the others, including our town manager.
Anybody else?
May I do a 60-second on the walkability?
Please.
Thank you.
Although, okay.
Mike Tomko, Walkability and Livability Community Workshop. Just to let everyone know that there's going to be a workshop, as Tom gratefully mentioned, on the 30th of October, starting here at 3 o'clock. We've had great response so far. There's been 11 individuals that have registered. There's another 6 that I know that haven't, but are planning on, so we're hoping for a wonderful turnout. Dan Burden is this community walkability expert from Port Townsend, Washington, and he's going to be doing economic as well as a livability and a community assessment of our trails and walkways, the downtown area, and like I said, we're just having a really good response. Anyone that's interested in participating, please get in touch with our town manager, Tom Wooden, to go ahead and register. Our cutoff for registering is going to be the end of this week. And we're also hoping, since recently completed the Boothbay Harbor pedestrian and bicycle workshop meetings, to take that information, roll it in as well to what goes on with the walkability audit, and then hopefully move that towards the comprehensive plan to make the place even better to walk and live. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Show up.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice. That ends the second public forum. I'd just like to take a brief moment, and we've lost most of our audience now, but perhaps the register could capture this, and thank everyone for conducting themselves in a civil and appropriate manner. We may not always agree, but we are always want the best for our town, and I applaud the audience for doing that, even though we didn't always agree, and it makes life a lot easier, and I think we get more accomplished, so thank you.
Thank you.
Goes to bed early.
I understand. The next item on our agenda is executive session. We are not scheduled to have one. We're not planning to have one. So we are next under warrants.
Motion we approve the warrants upon review.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the warrants on review. Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. The next item is a motion to adjourn. Do I hear one?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. There can be no discussion. All in favor?